Hi everyone, my name is Lisa Rossi. I am a Syracuse native and I'm a local photographer. I have turned my love and my passion for photography into a livelihood. This is how I support my family. I celebrated my 10-year anniversary this year, so I've been doing this for a while now. And honestly, I never thought I would be here because I love numbers and now I'm a photographer. So I want to talk to you guys about how the two relate. What does STEM have to do with photography? I went to school for finance, so I have an analytical mind, but I've always loved taking pictures. So I wanted to figure out how I could have them coexist. How can I combine the analytical side of my mind with the creative side of my mind? And turns out they go together like peanut butter and jelly. Math and photos. They're perfect together. I'm going to touch base on a few different math concepts that relate to photography today. There are so many out there, but I wanted to have fun with it and teach you guys a few things. And you're probably already doing some of these things that you don't even realize you're involving math with. So, first concept, we're going to talk about angles. Shoot high, shoot low. When you go to take a selfie, what do? Where do you put your camera? Do you put it down low and shoot up? No, you're you're probably not doing that. It's not flattering, right? That low angle is not flattering. It's going to make objects closer to the camera appear bigger. Who wants this to appear bigger? No. Now, it can be used to your advantage. If you want something to appear dominant, you want to shoot low. You're going to get that close to the camera. So think about shooting something low. What's your focus? If you were a sports photographer photographing a soccer game, you can highlight the ball, that athlete's calf and foot, get a really strong photo by getting a low angle. All right, the next angle is called the level angle, and that's just like this. You are gonna shoot that head on, straight on, and it's what people are most comfortable with. It is what you typically see. It's your line of sight, and so it's what you're used to seeing. And then the last angle is the high angle. So you're gonna go up and you're gonna shoot above that person's eye level. This is the most flattering. If you go and take a selfie, what do? You put your phone up here, don't you? It's the most flattering angle. Your eyes or the subject's eyes are going to be closest to the camera. So it's going to enlarge them, make them look better, and make everything else that's further away from the camera smaller. So further away from the camera, the smaller it's going to look. And that's why when you go to take a selfie, you put it up here. It's always going to be the most flattering angle. All right, so that's it for angles: low, level, high. They all have different purposes. They're all good. You just need to know what you're doing when you're shooting them. And then there's so much more too, right? You can go to the side, you can tilt your camera. There's lots more to think about, but those are the three basic angles. And it's a great starting point relating math to photography. All right, next up, it's another fairly simple concept. It's called the rule of thirds, and it's how you frame what you're taking a picture of. So when you look through your viewfinder, where are you placing your subject? Where are you placing the landscape? It's how you compose your picture to get the most visually appealing shot. All right, that visual shows you how you break up your view into thirds. You're going to chop it this way, you're going to chop it this way so that you have 9 squares. And where those lines intersect, those 4 points, those 4 blue points, those blue points are where your eyes tend to go. So you want to put your subject on those points and on those lines. All right, here is an example for you. See how I've lined up the subject? If she was facing the camera, her eyes would be right on that blue dot, but otherwise her entire body is lined up right on that vertical line. And that is just gonna make a photo more visually appealing. What about landscape photos when you don't have a subject? Those horizontal lines, you wanna put your horizon either here or on the top one. See that yellow highlighted line? That's where you want to put your horizon, either up there or down below. So here is it's a photo I took with my drone, but I lined up the horizon in the photo with that top line to make it more visually appealing. Easy peasy, right? All right, so that is called the rule of thirds. Done. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is called the exposure triangle. So what is exposure? That is how much light you're letting into your camera to get the best photo. And there are three components that really come into play when deciding what the best lighting is: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Okay, so let's start with shutter speed. So your shutter is opening and closing on your lens to allow light in. So if it's opening and closing quickly, you're not letting much light in. You have a high shutter speed, you're not letting a lot of light in. If you have a lower shutter speed, that shutter is open for a longer amount of time, allowing more light to enter your camera. I like to think about it in terms of my eyes as my So a good way for you to think about shutter speed, if your eyes are the camera and the lens, when you blink, that's shutter speed. So if you blink quickly, that's a very high shutter speed and you're not letting a lot of light in. If you blink slowly, there's more time for light to enter your eye. So you would think if you're in a low light situation, no problem, just lower that shutter speed, let a lot of light in, and then you have a brighter photo. But the problem is the longer that shutter is open, the blurrier objects can get. So if you're gonna try and take a picture of someone running past your camera, that shutter is gonna open and close. If you do it quickly, it'll grab that motion. But if you do it slowly, it's gonna be blurry. And this is why there are three sides to the exposure triangle, because now you need to balance how much light is coming in with also getting a clear picture. All right, so the second point of the triangle is called aperture, and it's measured, it's a term called f-stop on your camera. And this really talks about the size of your lens. So if you have a lower aperture f-stop, you're going to actually be letting more light into your camera. And if you have a higher aperture, you're letting less light into your camera. There's going to be less of the lens visible to get light into your camera. So in terms of using my eyes as an example of the lens or the camera, I like to think of squinting as aperture, because you'll let in more or less light depending on how big or small that opening is. So for shutter speed, think of blinking. For aperture, think of squinting. And the last point of the exposure triangle is called ISO. And this goes back to the days of film and how sensitive to light film was. So how much is your camera gonna let you absorb and record the light that is coming into your camera? If you have a sunny, bright day, you want to have a low ISO because your camera doesn't need much help absorbing that light and maintaining it for the image. But if you have a darker space or a cloudier day, you're going to need a higher ISO so that light has more time to really imprint into that image and make that image. Now, like the others, there's a catch with the ISO. If you have a low ISO, no problem. That's your goal, to get your ISO low. If you have a high ISO, what happens is your images start to get grainy. They're not as clear because you're not giving your camera enough time to like imprint the image. All right, in my example where we're using the eyeballs as our lens or our camera, ISO, sunglasses. So low ISO, it's clear. As you start to raise your ISO, things start to get a little grainy. All right, do you remember the 3 points of the exposure triangle? So we've got shutter speed, which is like blinking. We've got aperture, which is like squinting. And then we've got ISO, which is like putting on and off a pair of sunglasses. And the trick is to balance all 3 points so that you get the best exposure and a clear, bright picture. Thank you for letting me share all the things I love, numbers and math and photography. I hope it's been interesting and exciting, and I hope it will encourage you to look into it a little further and get out there and start capturing the world around you. Y'all still here and following me? Math is so fun, especially when you can combine it with something creative like photography. So just to review what we went through, we learned 3 things today: the exposure triangle, angles, and the rule of thirds. And I will say that I've never once taken an actual photography class. I've learned all of this as I go. In this day and age, digital cameras and even cell phones allow you so much opportunity because you can take as many pictures as you want. And the best way to learn is by practicing. So if you can go out there and start capturing the things around you in different lighting settings, you're going to learn these settings so quickly.